Political parties across the spectrum agree the economy is central to the life and well-being of the nation. Well, this week on Newsnight, we are going to try and cut through the election noise and look at the real state of the economy, canvassing concrete ideas on how to make it stronger and more inclusive, irrespective of who wins the election. Our first guest is the Minister of Economic Development, Ibrahim Patel. He's also a member of the ANC's Economic Transformation Committee. Good evening, Minister. Thanks very much for your time. Well, 5 trillion. I'm sure a lot of South Africans find it difficult to even know how many zeros go into that kind of figure. But of course, it is the economy by numbers, the size of the South African economy. Why is that number particularly important? Because incidentally, I saw this morning that after we had confirmed you for the program this evening, the President tweeted that number and said, of course, a couple of other things. Why is that significant?
So let me start by saying good evening, Vuyo. It's great to be back here, and to all the viewers. Now, that number of 5 trillion is the size of the economy. And it matters because the economy, the size of the economy shows us the new wealth that is created every year. And from there you pay wages and salaries, taxes are collected, pensions are paid, houses are built, police men and women are employed. So all the things that really matter to a country is generated from the GDP. And that GDP is a product of what all of us do. It's the farm worker out in the Eastern Cape. It's the financier in Sandton. It's the work that is done in the new economy, the ICT economy in Mpumalanga. It's what tourists go to when they spend money in the Western Cape. All of those together constitute your gross domestic product. And that 5 trillion is a significant number. And perhaps we can unpack a little bit some of the significance of that number. But that 5 trillion is made up by the activities of ordinary South Africans, of workers, of investors, of entrepreneurs, and of innovators, people who bring new ideas to the economy. I have an orange that I brought with today.
I was wondering why this orange was here.
Yeah, well, it's a gift for you. But really what it is, Vuyo, this orange, South Africa is currently the world's second biggest exporter of citrus fruit. We are second only to Spain. We've overtaken China. And we export something like 20 billion rands worth of oranges and lemons and nachis and maniolas and so on to the rest of the world. And that creates local jobs. That creates about 120,000 jobs in the overall value chain. And so you can take any slice of the South African economy and you can convert it to the wealth that it generates in any given year. That's the GDP. And what we look for is this 5 trillion growing? Is this 5 trillion significant compared to neighbors and to other parts of the world? And is this 5 trillion, how do we enhance it even more? And does this 5 trillion reach the person in the township,
and
the
that's
young person?
exactly where I want us to go, because 5 trillion may look like this very big number, and one isn't saying at all that it is not significant. And as the President said in his tweet this morning, we have the most diversified economy on the continent. But it means very little if there is very little, if any, growth. It means very little if so many millions of South Africans remain unemployed.
You've hit the nail on the head. So if we take the last 25 years, because in a few days' time, we're going to celebrate 25 years anniversary of this democracy. At the start of the democracy, in today's money, so if we convert all of it to today's money, 2018 rands, then the economy was worth, call it 2.5 trillion rand. So over this 25 years, we virtually doubled the size of the wealth. And you may think, well, what's happening
even in real terms?
In real terms. So this is not nominal, this is real terms. In nominal terms, it's grown much faster. But of course, that doesn't take account of inflation. So in real terms, it's virtually doubled. I think it's grown by about 97%. And in that same period, population grew by about 50%. So on the whole, the economy has grown and has grown fairly significantly in the 25 years. Of course, we need to grow it even more. But let me just give another number. South Africa today, if you had to rank all the countries in the world, we would be in the top 18% of countries in terms of the size of our GDP. And if you had to look at our biggest province by economic weight, which by the way is Gauteng. So Gauteng is our economic powerhouse, the engine that drives this economy. 1 out of every 3 rands is generated in Gauteng. Gauteng, if it was an independent country, would be the 6th largest economy on the African continent. And it would be an economy, there would be about more than 100 countries with a smaller economy than Gauteng. So South Africa is a fairly significant economy, but also with enormous challenges of jobs, poverty, inequality. And that goes to how that economy grows. Is it a jobs-rich growth? Does it give young entrepreneurs the opportunity to come in? And hopefully in the next few days, we can unpack a little bit some of these numbers. Where are we getting it right? Where are there challenges and we're not quite getting it right?
But as a unionist, I mean, and part of COSATU, over the years, you have been complaining about jobless growth. That's what COSATU has been talking about over and over again. That hasn't changed, has it, over the past few years?
I would say over the last 5 years, Vuyo, yes, the interesting story. If I had to ask you what you think has happened to jobs, you may be surprised if the answer is that in this administration, in the last 5 years, 1.5 million net new jobs have been created. Now, there's been job losses also. But if you take the job losses and the job growth, the sum of it, the net impact is 1.5 million net new jobs. So we are creating jobs. Not fast enough for young people entering the economy. Not fast enough for the rural person in the subsistence economy who leaves that area, goes into a town, looks for a job, and is now suddenly counted in our national statistics. But we are creating jobs. 1.5 million net new jobs in the last 5 years.
Well, but given the fact that it is in fact the private sector that is creating jobs. Really, how much bragging rights can a government have in that sector? What is it that you believe you have done without which, right, this economy wouldn't be where it is, notwithstanding the very slow growth rate and, of course, unemployment?
Well, let me start with the bragging rights. An economy is a complex thing, and so government has a role to play, but a lot of the fact that we've been able to create jobs is a result of the efforts of ordinary workers, of small businesses in townships, large investors in your main cities, all South Africans really. It's not something that government can say, we've done it. It's something that...
But governments do that. I mean, if you listen to, the ANC on the campaign trail, they will tell you about what they have done to take the economy where it is today. The Democratic Alliance will say, this is what we're going to do to create jobs, to build the economy. Politicians do that all the time.
They do, but I think an honest politician will recognize that we do it together. And that's why, if I for a moment just look at the ANC's position, they've been very clear that we grow the economy together. Partnerships. President Ramaphosa's signature story is partnerships. Let's do these things together. But let's come to the really important issue that you highlight, which is, does government play a role at all? Even if it is that it does some of the things, not all of it. Of course, government creates jobs directly in the public sector and through what is called the EPWP, the Extended Public Employment Program. But the more important job numbers are in the private sector, and government plays a role there. When we get it wrong, if we pass regulations on visas for tourists and there are fewer tourists coming into South Africa, it means it's a negative impact on jobs.
Which has happened.
But when we fix that problem, as we have, and we see the tourism numbers go up, as Derek Hanekom will tell you, that means we then contribute to it. When we form partnerships, when the President last year at the investment conference got in that room packed, it was standing room only, and he gets investors, small businesses, foreign direct investors there sitting with us, and they say we pledge 300 billion rand of fresh investment in the economy. That's how you create jobs. And as government, we create the policy environment. We enable these things to happen. And so policy does matter. Government does matter. And if South Africans, as we celebrate 25 years of democracy on Saturday, I think we can say, with all of our challenges, and there are significant challenges, and we mustn't downplay those challenges, but there's also real progress that we've made. Jobs is one of them, and growing the GDP is an area that we can say we celebrate. How do we now deepen it more?
In fact, policy certainty is, of course, one thing. But your ability to actually respond to the needs of the moment, linking them, obviously, to your policies and to the future, your agility is also what is equally important. I'm reminded here of, I think it was Agri-SA that was here a few weeks ago, talking about the drought that had affected mostly the northern provinces of the country, but how at the same time we have untapped potential when you look at provinces like KZN and parts of the Eastern Cape, which then begins to suggest, throw that, into that basket, some of the comments that certain ministers have made at some point or the other, or including the visa regime that you've had to correct, but which has been a factor in bringing down the tourism numbers. How much coordination and how have you really perfected the art of working together and bringing in all the economic ministries together so that the one side knows what the other side is doing and you're all really reading from the same hymn book, so to speak?
I think you make the obvious case, and the case is greater integration and coordination in government, but also between government and the private sector is absolutely vital. And over the last 12, say 14, perhaps 15 months, since the election of President Ramaphosa, you've seen much stronger coordination. We fixed the tourism challenge, the visa regime, but we also did some other things. We've publicized the new plan around renewable energy and unblocked a couple of key investments in energy. We got investors around the table at the investment conference, and that was an important one. We brought a degree of policy certainty on some of the issues in the mining sector, and I think those all contribute to greater certainty. So coordination is a work in progress, but it is an area that the President has focused a lot of his executive attention on, getting the economic cluster to work closely with each other, but also opening up that line of communication with the business community and with the trade unions. By the way, trade unions are quite a critical part of our economic growth story, not only because workers are key drivers of production, but also unions and workers have access to investment funds through, among others, where the pension funds are invested. Are they invested in South Africa, in productive sectors, through the efforts of workers and trade unions to work cooperatively with businesses to increase the effectiveness and competitiveness of their businesses. So those are important elements of it. But I want to stand back and say that 5 trillion we looked at earlier, it was 2.5 trillion 25 years ago. So we've got to look at how do we increase it in the next 25 years or sooner by a much bigger multiple. And then you come to policy. So that is, what are the key policy elements that underpin that? And may I literally bullet point 5 or 6 what I call I's that goes to the policy story.
Very briefly.
Very briefly, investment, infrastructure, because that sets the foundations of growth. Innovation, bringing new ideas to what we do. Industrialization, it's critical to support your manufacturing sector. Integration, which is the storyline around African economic integration. President Ramaphosa signed the Free Trade Area Agreement for the African continent last year. It's going to connect 54 African countries and give us a market of more than 1 billion people. And then I want to bring a very important eye to it, which is the issue of inclusion. Young people, small businesses, black South Africans, bringing all of that together. And finally, integrity and implementation, getting the state to do its job and not to get distracted, and focusing on policies that promote inclusive growth.
So that's why we're going to leave it for this evening. Thanks very much for coming through. Minister for Economic Development, Ibrahim Patel, will, of course, throughout the course of this week be debating the sentiments he expressed, as well as the numbers that government has put out there. We'll be talking to various stakeholders, including business people, academics, opposition parties, and everybody who has a stake. That is